If you work for the Catholic Church and want to transform the culture of your parish and put more souls in the pews, we're here to help. I'm Ty Hua, here with my co-host John Kahns, and this is the Catholic Ministry Professionals Podcast, your favorite leadership development podcast for Catholic churches. Each week, you can expect engaging discussions, expert interviews, and actionable advice to help you move Jesus' mission forward in your parish. Today, we're discussing setting professional boundaries in Catholic ministry. How to establish boundaries that help you balance work and life, improve clarity and communication, and make more space for the most important missional work in the church. John, I before I say this next thing, how are you?
I'm good. I'm a little worried what you're going to come down on me for.
Well, it's not coming down on you. I
Good.
just think this, you could take out, when I said setting professional boundaries in Catholic ministries, or in ministry, it could be reworded to setting professional boundaries as a Catholic, period. Because I think working in the workforce, as long as I have, understanding even from a faith perspective of like, hey, you're a Catholic working in the secular world, you are going to have some interfaith discussions, whether that's with Protestants or Muslims or Hindu believers, atheists, agnostic, you name it, like setting professional boundaries within the same context of like, how do I still evangelize?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Well,
that's where my mind goes to.
the other thought I had was it's a tale as old as time, right? Somebody goes to a retreat, they're on fire, and then they get made like the owner of a ministry because they're the only person who's engaged in the parish, and they go, "Oh, let's give you everything," and then they burn out because there aren't good boundaries there, or they didn't know enough, and the parish didn't know enough to say they're not ready for this yet, or maybe even they're not looking for this. Which actually, it comes back to me. We had our families together this weekend, and it comes back to me like so much. It was so good just to have friends around and be together, and we talk about life, we talk about faith, we talk about family, raising kids, all that stuff, and how good that was for my soul, and how I think that is just so integral in this next apostolic age of our church, that we don't try to rehash all the old stuff, but we really teach people how to live in community, to have communion with one another. And I think that's really kind of so much at the center of what I see that our conversation comes back to a lot on the podcast, is just how good and how necessary it is to have friends with whom you have the faith as the center of those friendships. And that becomes then a really healthy boundary, or a really something that feeds your soul in a way that it gives you the strength to set really healthy boundaries too. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's not just for people who work in the church. It's Catholics in general. How do we set healthy boundaries? Here's the other question I'll ask you, Ty, as long as we're just kind of talking about this. How do you feel about work-life balance in general, like as a concept? Because I think it's an idea that we're like, yeah, I should have better balance. But I think one of the problems with it is that it assumes that your work and your life are totally separate, that they don't integrate at all. Does that make sense? When I say that, does that make sense or strike a chord at all?
I like the concept. I hate the terminology.
Say more about that.
So this is coming from the sales perspective, right? So there's the salespeople that do really well, make a ton of money. They don't have a work-life, air quote, balance. But the salespeople that struggle always blame the work-life balance of why they struggle. You're burnt out because you're not actually intentionally doing the thing you're supposed to be doing, so you're not getting the results you should be getting. And instead of taking accountability for it, what they tend to do is step back and say, hey, it's not my fault. It's just I don't have good work-life balance. No, you're partly right, but you're also mostly wrong in that it's not your fault. No, it is your fault. When you're at work, you're not working. And then when you go home, you're not at home. You're not mentally checked in. So I love the concept of, hey, work life. Okay, you're at work. But what's the purpose of why you work? It's to provide for your family and your life outside of work. And then when you're doing everyday life outside of work, you should be enjoying it and not worried about work. And I think we get those things mixed up. It's like even if you have a 70-30 split or 30-70 split, we're always there's always going to be that brackish water, so to speak, where it just kind of flows in between. Like there's a gray area. I just think if we all intentionally did what we were supposed to do when we were supposed to do it, we wouldn't have to worry about a balance. We would just know, like, hey, I'm with my family, I'm with my wife, I'm with my kids. Shout out to Bill McGuckin, who's in my men's group. He's got like specific times of the morning where it's set aside for him and his wife. Then it's him, his wife, and the kids. It's to the point where, like, if the kids try to barge in during their morning prayer or whatever it is that they do in the morning, he'll actually say, "Hey, kids, this is mom and dad's time. We're praying, we're communicating. Can you give us our time?" When he told me that, I'm like, dude, that's awesome. Like, my 20-month-old has no concept of that,
I was gonna say,
especially at 3 o'clock in the morning.
I was gonna say, have you tried that with Teddy?
Yeah. So I just think that the work life balance needs to be, if you're going to actually invoke that, you need to actually be working when you're supposed to be working. And when you're living life, you need to be living that life.
Yeah, in my mind that work-life balance is about being fully present for the thing that's in front of you that you're supposed to be doing. And it's in that spirit then that I want to kind of mention our key verse, our key scripture verse today, which should be familiar for people. It's from Matthew 5 verse 37. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. And this scripture really speaks to the importance of clarity in communication and setting intentional, clear boundaries as a way to ensure that your yes means yes. Like your yes to work, you're fully present for this. Your yes at home, you're fully present for this. Your yes means yes, your no means no. And it's a call to align our words and our actions with our purpose without overcommitting, overcomplicating, or adding unnecessary stress into our lives. So, I think that what we often run into is that the Catholic ministry professionals are deeply passionate about their work, right? And even I would even say for you, Ty, you're passionate about your work. What that can lead someone to, and to often say is I can add one more thing. Yes, I can squeeze that in without considering the overall, like the larger goals or the vision. And so this constant drive can result in burnout, blurred boundaries in between life and work and in life and work, and a lack of clarity just for the job that you're called to do. So many ministry professionals also, because uh, we have big bleeding hearts and we desire to give, we can avoid healthy conflict out of, I guess, a misguided desire to protect other people's feelings, right? We tend to avoid those difficult conversations. And that can also be too, like here in the Midwest, there's a general level of passive aggressiveness that's just built into how we're raised in the environment that we're in. And so we try to avoid these tough issues and add stress to our plate. So there could be that. So it all leads to unclear expectations, unnecessary stress, and often a sense of overwhelm. So what we're going to do today, is look at some examples of ways that this clearly that this often comes in, these professional boundaries, because they're not just all about this is when I start my day, this is when I end my day. It's about a lot of other things. I've heard of Catholic ministry professionals that part of their job has become to do like the pastor's laundry, right? Or to take the pastor's dog for a walk, right? And these are things that you were not hired to do, right? If I'm a tithing member of that parish and I see that that's now become a part of your job, that's not what I tithe to the church to pay you to do, right? So they get asked to do these things which go beyond actual typical work responsibilities. But there's other really simple ways that work boundaries come into, these professional boundaries, and that can be with interactions with parishioners, not just in person, but online, right? What's your email response time? What do people expect from you? What should they actually expect from you? Because I've left the office at 5, had somebody send me an email at 5:10 p.m. on a Friday, and then I didn't get back to them until Monday at 9 a.m. And to me, that's reasonable. I'm at home. I'm not on call for anything. I don't have any events over the weekend. But then get that email on 9 a.m. because I didn't respond on time, right? So all of that's about managing expectations and then taking on tasks that don't align with the role, right? There might be administrative roles that they try to give to you that aren't really part of your job, or personal requests from parishioners that aren't related to the work you do. All of this comes down to managing expectations, really setting clear boundaries with clarity and consistency so that you can be more free to do the things you were hired to do, to enter into the mission that God has given you. And I promise if you do that, you set these clear boundaries, you're going to improve your work-life balance, but you're also going to have more time for the missional work that is assigned to you. And in doing so, you're going to experience reduced burnout because you'll actually be doing the work that feeds your life. So let's dive in today. Let's learn a little bit more about making our yes mean yes and our no mean no, and avoiding all the things that come from the evil one and try to steal us. How's that sound, Ty?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So the first thing I want to do, the first thing that we're going to go into the 3 things to consider when you're setting professional boundaries is the clarity of your role and defining your priorities. And this is strange because we often get hired at one point. You might get hired, and then 3, 4, 5 years down the road, little things get added to your plate, and suddenly the job you're doing looks nothing like the job you were hired to do. And because nothing's down on paper, and I've worked at parishes where there's no, you never sit down and you never like talk with the pastor about like, this is the role. It's just like you inherit the role that was there before, and you have to do that, but you're never signing an actual agreement that this is the job, this is what we've discussed, these are the goals, this is the role, these are the activities to week, this is what we've agreed upon, and then there's a signature from both of you. Like there's never a moment where you get together and actually agree on what it looks like. So before you can set really effective boundaries, you need to be very clear on your role. And if it hasn't been defined for you, then you might have to kind of step in a little bit and define it yourself and set those meetings to say, hey, I want to really know what it is, Father Joe, that you are asking me to do, right? I want to very clearly know like where your heart is in this, where your mind is in this, how all this lines up. And then what are the core responsibilities with that? What are your priorities in the vision for the parish? And if the pastor doesn't have one, okay, great. That means that maybe you can step in, or you can ask that permission to set the priorities and the responsibilities to help you understand where to draw the line. And another thing I do want to keep an eye out for is there's always a little line in any agreement that says, and any other tasks and responsibilities as assigned. Ty, I saw you smirk there. What's that make you feel?
It's just a catch-all. Like
It's a catch-all.
I can tell you to do whatever the heck I want as your boss. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. It's corporate jargon.
It's corporate jargon, and they will throw that in there because they want the opportunity to say, hey, you need to do this. But just because that line's in there doesn't mean, I mean, yes, they could kind of, I suppose, back up on a wall and say, well, you have to do this because I told you to. But that all comes down to, again, discussing expectations and setting boundaries for yourself, because there are some boundaries that, you maybe can't cross, because it does actually begin to impede on your family time, or it does begin to impede on just your own ability to live life with the pursuit of happiness. So you got to keep an eye out for some of those things and see what they look like, and have real conversations about that. Ty, you have any other thoughts on clarifying your role and defining your priorities?
Yeah, I think I would say it's a warning to anybody interviewing for a job, not just as a Catholic ministry professional, but it's, you got to look out for your best interest, because as a interviewee, you are excited about the prospect of landing this job, especially if you're fresh out of college, especially if you're younger. But don't be lulled into this false dichotomy of like, you got to do whatever it takes to get this job, because the job that you prayed for and you're hoping to get could eventually be the one that you're praying to get out of. You could be unintentionally putting yourself into the corner of being bullied into doing the priest's laundry or walking his dog or whatever isn't, important to your current role. So I would just be careful there, because your job satisfaction has a lot to do with knowing what you're supposed to be doing and what you're going to be held accountable to, and understanding if you're doing a good job doing those things. right? So for the priests out there listening to this, make sure your employees know exactly what they're going to be graded on, so to speak, or evaluated on, whatever you want to say, and do those evaluations every year, if not, more frequently, just so that your employees have that satisfaction of saying, hey, I'm doing a really good job in my role. That helps avoid burnout. It takes away this idea of like, man, I don't know where I stand with the priest. I don't know where I stand with administration. Put it out there. If your people are doing a good job, tell them that they're doing a good job. If they're not doing a good job, tell them where they're lacking, right? Going back to our key scripture verse, let your yeses be yes and your noes be no. Anything other than that's from the evil one. And guess what? The evil one wants to destroy your team because they're working to his demise. So that's what I got to say about that.
Yeah, and I would say too, like that could be an overwhelming idea for a pastor to be sitting in those meetings and do that. And so I would encourage you, if that is something and you're in charge of a team and it's overwhelming or intimidating for you to think of leading in that way, bring us in for a workshop. And send me an email, john@catholicmenpros.com. And we have a workshop. We'll meet with you and build that out and give you the template that you need, the 5 meetings that you need to really manage your team, your people, your parish. And it can be that simple. It's just a matter of putting that rhythm in place, and we can plan that out for you. All right, the second one on our list, the second thing you're going to want to do if you want to set professional boundaries, you've clarified your role. You know what the expectations are. You know what the responsibilities are. Now you need to see and assess how you're spending your time. This is a classic time audit. And so I want to encourage you, go to catholicministryprofessionals.com/resources and just download our time audit worksheet. It's really simple. It's going to look at, give you an opportunity to evaluate how your current schedule aligns with your role and responsibilities. Are you spending time on the most important mission-driven tasks, or are you overextended on the other end, responding to requests that don't respond and don't align with the priorities and that you and the pastor have agreed on? A time audit gives you insight to where you might need to set firmer boundaries, but it also gives you kind of raw data, gives you real facts about your job, about how your time is spent, that you can then go have a real concrete conversation with. Sometimes we go into a meeting with our pastor and say, man, I don't like this thing or how it's working. But it's more of an ethereal, elusive conversation. When you do a real concrete time audit, you're looking at every hour, do it in hour blocks or half hour blocks or 15-minute blocks, however you want to do it. But you look at that and you can say, wow, I'm spending 70% of my time on something that yields very little results. And so it gives you, just, again, real concrete things to talk about, real concrete items on your list that you can chat with your pastor about and say, hey, can we work together to make the stuff I work on align more with the goals that we have set, the vision that Jesus has given us for our parish? And then the third thing I would say is just to learn to say no. You have to learn to say no and protect your energy. And this is really important. Let your yes mean yes. Let your no mean no. It's easy to feel guilty when you're saying no, especially when it's a great idea or it's something that somebody's really passionate about. But it's essential to remember that saying yes to everything can lead to burnout. But also, you have to remember that when you say no, if it's something that doesn't align with your mission or priorities, when you say no, you're really saying yes to the bigger, more important thing. So it's just a healthy way to protect your energy and to make room for the work that matters most. And I get it. Again, it's really tough to say no. I've had people come to me, and especially if you're taking on a new role in a parish, sometimes there's been somebody who sunset a previous ministry, and you got someone who comes in and is really fired up for you to take on this ministry again or restart it in the parish so they can do this thing they love. And it's hard to say no. But the beautiful thing about saying no for yourself is it could be a yes for that person to step into leadership that they really need as well. So just because you're saying, no, I'm not going to take this on, doesn't mean that there can't be space for those people to still say yes in their own way to that desire that they have in their heart, to that thing they feel God is calling them to do. And so no is an important word. And it's the same thing with our kids as well, right? No is a powerful word, and it's something we have to say to our children as well. We can't just say yes to every little whim, desire, and fancy that pops into their head. And often when you say no, it's actually the more formative, more important thing that you can tell them that is going to give them kind of be that hinge moment where they experience growth.
One tip that I would have for somebody that struggles with saying no, say no in context, right? And what I mean by that is don't just say, no, I'm not going to do that and become that, you know, toddler in the room. There are different ways to say no. One of them, my favorite, is to say, hey, I'm also dealing with this, this, and this. Which one of those do you want me to stop doing so that I could pick up what you're asking me to do now? So it's not just a simple, no, I don't want to do it. It's like, no, I can't do it because I've already said yes to these three things, or four or five, whatever, that have already taken a lot of the time and energy. And so if you want me to quit one of those other things to pick up this, that's fine. But now you're essentially putting the ball in their court to say, which one of these would you like me to say no to say yes to this? It's just a more viable conversation to have because now they understand the person that you're having this conversation with that's asking you to pick up another thing. They understand you're not saying no out of spite. You're saying no because you're lacking time or resources to handle everything. And it's just an easier way to digest, and you're working with them to say no.
I really think too that that nuance that you just said there too really shows the importance of the first two steps of this that we've talked about as well, which is defining your role, really knowing what your actual responsibilities are in light of the vision, and then assessing how you spend your time. Because then when you have that response that you just gave, Ty, you have real concrete things that you're bringing to the table in that conversation. And it does remind me of a conversation. I know this is a story I've shared before, but I was working in a Catholic school, and the principal came up to me and he said he wanted me to do more evening activities. But I knew from my contract and from tracking my own hours that I was obligated to be in the school 40 hours a week already. And on top of that, I was tracking my hours. I knew I was working 50 to 55 hours on average every week. And so when he asked me to do more, I said, well, I can't. Actually, I'm already doing 55 hours. I'm obligated to be here in the school day. And like we've hit the limit on my availability. So if that's what you want, then we need to renegotiate my contract. And as soon as I did that, he was like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then the next year, he did kind of nuance the contract so that we could have a conversation about that. But that just is all goes to say that we really need to you need to be comfortable saying no because I could have just easily said, oh yeah, that's a good idea, and either just not done it, which would have been not say my yes wouldn't have been yes, or I could have just said, well, let's keep talking about it and kick the can down the road. But that wouldn't have served the mission. That wouldn't have served my own work and life balance that was in the mix there. Um, Keeping all that in mind, doing those three things, I think we can move on to the devil's advocate. Dun dun.
Theoretically, this sounds amazing. I mean, it really does. But in reality, where we all live, I'm too passionate about my work. I don't want to turn anyone down. I don't want to disappoint anybody. I feel like I need to be available at all times for everybody. How do I balance my passion with setting these boundaries?
That's a fair statement. We are passionate about the mission that God has given us. But we have to keep in mind that there is a proper order, right? The order amoris of our lives, like the order of love in our lives. And there can be a strong temptation. Again, the classic phrase, if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy, right? Your vocation actually probably isn't primarily to your work because most of the people listening to this are probably married and they probably have kids. And so you have to remember the reasons why you're setting these boundaries. And it's so that your life can be in the proper order so that you can, with freedom, with love, with joy, fully enter into both the work and the life part of like the life balance, that you can have both of those. So Setting boundary doesn't mean you don't care about your work or the people you serve. Setting clear boundaries actually gives you more freedom, gives you more energy and more intentionality to be able to serve the people more effectively in your ministry. And by defining what's most important and protecting your energy, you can be more present in more meaningful ways without burning out for those people that you serve. So saying no to certain things is really just saying yes to what matters the most. And it gives you the space to serve with greater purpose and greater joy. And so that's why it's important to have those clearly set boundaries, especially if you are passionate about your work, so that passion, it's not running off without prudence, but it's running in a direction with clarity and with intentionality. So should we move on to some actionable steps for setting professional boundaries? All right. Of course, we never want to leave you without something that you can do today to take action on our conversation. And so I want to invite you to go to catholicministryprofessionals.com/resources and download our time audit worksheet so that you can assess how your time is being spent and determine if it aligns with your goals and your priorities. And you can use this worksheet really to evaluate how your time matches your role, your parish mission. You can reflect on the results and see how adjusting your boundaries accordingly can ensure that you're focused on the right things, on the missional work, but that you're not overextended to where the mission has to go sit on the sideline. So if you notice an area where a boundary needs to be reset or needs to be set, I want you to just actually take time to send an email to that person and schedule that conversation, put it on your calendar. And those are the two things to do today. Download the time audit worksheet, and then based on your time audit, to send an email to the person that you need to set a boundary with and start that conversation today. And with that, I want to thank you for listening to the Catholic Ministry Professionals podcast. Next week, we'll be moving on to a whole new topic. This was just kind of a one-off topic on boundaries. But if you found this episode helpful, please take a few seconds to text it to a priest or a friend in ministry that could benefit from it.
With that, we'll see you in the vineyard.